Va a tardar un poquito. Como unos 10 segundos. Para este estilo uso un palito de paleta como módulo o como regla para dibujar los trazos. Y si toman como referencia este palito de paleta, las letras son 5 veces el ancho del palito de paleta en promedio. Les pediría que dibujen esta escala de 5 cuadritos en la esquina superior izquierda de su papel con este mismo acomodo. Les voy a dar un momento para que dibujen la escala y pueden trazar estos trazos de práctica, pueden dibujar estos trazos de práctica con la anchura de un palito de madera. Ahorita no lo notan, pero podrán ver cómo se alternan los trazos. John, we have a problem with the audio. Give me a second. Les pido un momento, tenemos problemas con el audio. ¿Me escu-
En Facebook se cayó la transmisión.
Hola. Creo que ya resolvimos el problema del audio. Y en Facebook se cayó la transmisión.
Ahora también en YouTube se ve todo negro, pero se escucha bien.
No, es que estoy arreglando el audio.
Bien.
El- Les agradezco su paciencia. Regresamos. Me confirman en YouTube si ya pueden escuchar a John. John, can you speak?
Yes. Test, test, test. Testing. Testing. Microphone check.
Se escucha bien.
Se escucha bien.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So here I'm using the same tempera paint as I used yesterday. It's Blick brand tempera, and I'm using the MAC 1/4 inch synthetic flat. It's the Golden Taclon Series 162.
Estoy usando tempera, al igual que el día de ayer, y estoy usando el pincel de la marca MAC de 1/4 de pulgada. Es la serie de taclón dorado.
John, there are some questions from the audience.
Okay.
What if they don't have a wood stick? How
You can make one out of paper that is one brush stroke wide. So make a stroke and then cut it out of paper.
Si no tienen palito de madera, pueden hacer un template o una plantilla con un pedacito de cartulina o papel que sea del ancho de un trazo de su pincel.
So use a pair of scissors. As soon as it's dry, cut that out, make it long, and then trace on each side using the little strip of paper the same way you'd use the stick.
Y pueden cortarlo a lo largo y pueden dibujar y pueden calcarlo por ambos lados como si fuera un palito de madera.
I use paper cutouts regularly for layout purposes and as templates for other cutouts. So my former partner turned 80 years old just a couple weeks ago. I made this little template to make a second template. So if the paper is stiff like this, it will give you a sharp enough edge to follow with a pencil or pen.
A veces utilizo plantillas de papel calado a manera de template para calcar las letras. Esto les dará una oportunidad de poder trazar o de poder calcar las letras con un borde muy definido.
So describing what I'm doing here, I'm pulling a single stroke, letting the brush come up on end as it reaches the baseline, and then I slide it just a little bit side to side to square it off.
Ahora lo que estoy haciendo es un trazo de arriba hacia abajo y al final, justo al final, muevo el pincel de lado a lado para hacer la esquina, las esquinas.
You see how I slide it side to side.
Tenemos que moverlo de lado a lado.
So when I have a series of these strokes, I'm keeping my eye on the space between the strokes to make sure that those are uniform as well. So positive and negative.
Cuando estoy haciendo estos trazos, pongo mucha atención al espacio que hay entre ellos. Deben de ser igualmente uniformes.
That's right.
Considerando el espacio positivo y negativo.
Exactly. So I'll go a little faster now.
Lo empezaré a hacer más rápido.
So these are the vertical foundation strokes for this alphabet.
Estos son los trazos básicos para este estilo.
And I want to give you just a little bit of time to experiment with the width of the brush to see how it feels when you flatten it out to the full width for these upper corners.
Y les voy a dar un poco de tiempo para que practiquen estos trazos para ver cómo se sienten con la anchura que les da el pincel y al tratar de esquinar estos trazos.
Now, I will say that a common problem is to start with the brush not chiseled enough so that the top of the stroke is narrow and the bottom of the stroke is wide.
Un problema muy común con el pincel es que no lo aplanan lo suficiente y cuando hacen eso generalmente obtienen trazos muy delgados, un trazo delgado al inicio y más ancho al final.
And you can see how the stroke gets heavy and then it's not square at the bottom because when you widen the brush to its maximum width, it's very hard to stop it.
Y también pueden ver cómo al final queda en la parte más gruesa queda redondeado. Y eso sucede porque cuando aplican la máxima presión para obtener la máxima anchura, ya no pueden controlar el final.
Another common problem is to fail to give the brush a big enough load so that you run out of paint.
Otro problema
at the
común
bottom.
es que no cargan el pincel con la suficiente pintura para completar el trazo.
John, we have a question.
Yes.
With vertical block strokes, do you start with the end of your brush pointed at your chin and ending at your eyebrows, like casual strokes?
Yes, but in this case, I'm working on the top line, and it's a little bit out of range for me. So let me demonstrate on this line here, and I can say for sure that the brush is now pointed at my chin, okay, and I pull it down, and now it's pointed just above my eyes, just about my eyebrow.
La pregunta es si para este estilo también la inclinación del pincel cambia apuntando desde su mejilla hasta sus ojos, y la respuesta de John es que sí, que en este estilo también la inclinación del pincel cambia en ese rango, desde su mejilla hasta la altura de sus ojos, más o menos. Es aproximado.
True. And this is called a squaring stroke. It's a horizontal correction of the ending of those two strokes. You have a junction here of the diagonal and the vertical, so it helps to square the bottom off with a tiny little stroke that looks like that.
Este pequeño trazo es un trazo para esquinar, y este sirve para refinar la unión entre el trazo de diagonal y el trazo vertical. Le podemos llamar el trazo esquinador.
So there are 4 kinds of straight strokes: the vertical, the horizontal, like this, and then diagonal, both leaning to the right, and the opposite, the mirror image of that would be leaning to the left. Not a
Tenemos
good.
4 trazos básicos rectos, que sería el horizontal, el vertical y los dos diagonales, cada uno apuntando a diferente dirección.
And again, to repeat this, I want to tuck the brush into this corner and this corner. So to do that, I create a rotation.
Para el trazo esquinador vamos a intentar alcanzar las dos esquinas y para eso tenemos que girar el pincel.
Right.
Oh.
I've discovered my paint is just a little too thin, but that will save me the trouble of adding water later.
Me di
So
cuenta que
I
mi
put
pintura
some on
está
the
un
palette
poco
cup.
líquida.
So if you continue one line of practice strokes vertical, then next I'll go through the mechanics of creating the horizontals.
Intentemos hacer una línea o un renglón practicando estos trazos. Y también practiquemos los horizontales.
Just to review how the brush is gripped. Remember, the thick part of the handle, the wide part of the handle, can be rotated between your thumb and forefinger, and you rest the handle of the brush on your middle finger.
Y recuerden cómo tenemos que agarrar el pincel. Se agarra de la parte más gordita del mango para poder girar. Se agarra entre el dedo pulgar y el dedo índice. Y con el dedo medio es donde se descansa el mango.
So imagine that when we get to the round letters, I will be twisting the brush like this, but the end of the handle rotates too. So there's both pivoting of the brush and rotation of the brush. By pivoting, I'm talking about this action. Okay, round and round and round. But keep in mind that the brush is rotating as well. So it's a rather complex move.
Cuando lleguemos a los trazos curvos, vamos a rotar el pincel, pero no solamente de su parte inferior, sino también la parte superior va a girar, teniendo como eje la parte media donde estamos agarrando nuestro pincel.
Think of the solar system. The Earth rotates on its axis one revolution every 24 hours, but it circles the sun in 365 days.
Pensémoslo como en el sistema solar, que en el caso el planeta Tierra gira en 24 horas con su movimiento de rotación y un año con su movimiento de traslación.
So the distinction I'm making here is between the rotation of the Earth on its axis and the orbit around the sun. Two things are happening at once. The Earth does not stop its orbit every 24 hours and start all over again. No, that's the rotation.
Estoy haciendo esta comparación para decirles que el pincel gira y rota. A ver, esto se me hizo un poquito complicado. Ahí les va otra vez. Hice esta comparación porque la Tierra no se detiene al girar 24 horas y empieza otra vez, sino se mantiene girando durante toda la traslación. Algo similar sería con el pincel. Lo vamos a mantener rotando y al mismo tiempo trasladando.
I hope that is a easy analogy to understand.
Espero que sea una analogía fácil de entender.
Yeah. Okay, how are we doing? Do you have a few practice strokes done? Would anybody like to show their work?
¿Alguien quiere mostrar sus trazos de práctica? No sean tímidos, que no les dé frío.
They need more time, do you think?
¿Necesitan más tiempo?
I have some.
Okay.
Okay. It's so few. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, moving right along. Okay. Yes, your evenly spaced strokes are creating the negative shapes that I want to see. So there's as much space between the strokes as the strokes are wide. So
Okay.
even, odd, very, very much like piano keys.
Okay. Perfect. Thank
Muy
you.
bien.
Good to see. Good to see.
Tus
Thank
trazos
you.
van muy bien. El espacio entre los trazos están generando el espacio negativo que quiero ver. Muy bien.
Okay.
Would anybody else like to
Enrique.
show?
Enrique,
Okay. All right. Good so far.
muy bien. Hasta ahora muy bien.
All right. Gracias.
Yo,
Erika quiere mostrar.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Muy bien.
Gracias.
Gracias, Erika.
yo quisiera mostrar también.
¿Quién habló? El fantasma. Ándale, Jordan.
¿Se ve ahí?
Yes. Ready. Oh, nice. Yeah. Look pretty sharp. I believe your paint is rather dilute and maybe a little too thin. So you've added too much water to the paint, I believe. You could mix a second batch with the paint more concentrated.
Tus trazos se ven muy definidos, pero creo que tu tinta está muy diluida. A lo mejor
Sí,
te
de acuerdo.
convendría tener un segundo lote de pintura.
Ok, de acuerdo. Gracias.
¿Alguien más?
Okay. So the horizontal strokes are usually quite easy to learn, and they're because horizontal strokes tend to be shorter than vertical strokes, even for a letter like capital T.
Los trazos horizontales son más fácil de aprender porque son más cortos. Por ejemplo, en la letra T.
And the horizontal strokes also give you the advantage of having a better view. In other words, your brush doesn't get in the way of your eyesight. Stop it on end like that. Up on end, and you can give it a little flick.
Estos trazos tú los puedes generar a la altura de tu visión o de tu mirada. Y al final puedes darles un pequeño toque o pequeño gesto.
Okay, so those came out very nice, like bricks in a wall.
Estos quedaron muy bien, se ven como ladrillos en la pared.
So let's take a few minutes and practice horizontal strokes to see if we can get good square corners.
Tomémonos un tiempo para practicar los horizontales, intentando hacer unas esquinas bonitas.
Now, if you're having trouble getting good square corners, it might be because your brush is not loaded properly.
Si les cuesta trabajo hacer esquinas definidas, quizá el problema sea que no están cargando su pincel correctamente.
And I'll demonstrate what a stroke looks like when the brush is overloaded and not chiseled properly. You'll get a stroke that looks like this with rounded corners.
Cuando cargan su pincel incorrectamente y lo saturan mucho con pintura, lo que va a pasar que van a tener un trazo redondeado.
Now, if the paint load is insufficient, it won't pose a problem until you get a very long stroke. So a short stroke with underloaded brush, that's okay. But by comparison, if you want to make a long horizontal stroke, you're going to run out of paint.
Y por el contrario, si no cargan su pincel lo suficiente, van a tener problemas. Quizá no para trazos horizontales pequeñitos, pero sí para trazos horizontales un poco más largos.
So right here, you can't see it very well, but from my point of view, I can see the brush, the streaks there. And so I could only get from this point to this point before I essentially start running out of paint.
A lo mejor no lo pueden ver, pero al final el trazo se ve un poco seco y pueden ver la textura. Y solamente van a poder hacer un trazo parcial.
So if you want to make a long, broad stroke like this, the trick is to do the top edge followed by the bottom edge and then fill the middle.
Una técnica para hacer este tipo de trazos horizontales largos es crear líneas apoyándose en la regla y al final rellenándolos.
So you do it in 3 parts: top, bottom, middle.
Y se hacen 3 partes. Trazan el borde superior, después el borde inferior y después lo rellenan con el trazo del medio.
Now, obviously, if you want to do the same vertically, then you just rotate the paper.
Y si van a hacer lo mismo, pero vertical, es más fácil rotar el papel.
So if I want this stroke this way, I'd make this the bottom edge of my paper, rotate the paper, and then I do the same horizontal strokes and then turn the paper back to its original orientation.
Y si quiero hacer ese tipo de trazos de manera vertical, roto el papel y hago lo mismo.
It's so much easier than trying to do a line like this,
Es mucho
because
más,
already I'm running out of paint.
es mucho más fácil que tratar de hacer el trazo vertical, porque a fin de cuentas me voy a quedar sin tinta.
So from here down to here, I've run out of paint.
De aquí a aquí ya no tengo tinta.
These are little tricks you learn from working in the trade, mainly with older and wiser practitioners. You learn the tricks of the old timers.
Y estos son los trucos de la vieja escuela.
Okay. So if we've spent a little time doing the horizontal strokes, the next, and these are the 2 difficult straight strokes. Ya que tomaron un tiempo haciendo los trazos horizontales, vamos a intentar los diagonales. I should point out that for optical reasons, a stroke that slants this direction is a little bit thinner than a stroke that slants this direction. And that's for optical compensation. remember that our Roman alphabet is based on thicks and thins, so that, for instance, to make the letter A, this is the thin stroke, whereas the opposite side, the other diagonal, is the thick stroke, like that. And then the bar is also a thin stroke.
Me gustaría comentarles que con las diagonales sucede algo curioso. La diagonal que va de izquierda a derecha y arriba a abajo es un poco más gruesa que la diagonal que va de abajo hacia arriba, de izquierda a derecha. Y eso es porque desde las letras romanas tenemos la diagonal que va de abajo hacia arriba, es la diagonal delgadita, y la diagonal que va de arriba hacia abajo, del lado derecho, es más pesada.
So this is a matter of human perception. And if you make a stroke that leans to the right, and then you look at that in the mirror image, it doesn't appear to be the same weight.
Eso más que nada se debe a la percepción humana. Si hacen este trazo y lo ven en un espejo, no se va a ver del mismo ancho.
So now I'll do it without the guidelines. What I do is I slide the brush into the sharp corner, then I back the brush out and pull it this way.
Ahora lo vamos a hacer sin la guía. Para empezar el trazo voy a colocar mi pincel y lo voy a trasladar un poquito hacia la derecha, hacer la esquina y entonces nos movemos hacia abajo.
So the opposite is true here. I slide it to the left, that's the sharp corner, then I back it out, pull the brush down, stop it at the baseline and slide it a little bit to the right.
Y lo mismo es para la diagonal derecha, solamente que del lado opuesto. Coloco mi pincel y lo muevo hacia la derecha y me voy hacia abajo. Y antes de finalizar, lo muevo hacia la izquierda.
Like that. So a few more minutes to practice the diagonal strokes. And they don't have to lean as much as my strokes lean. I just want you to get the feel of what it is to slide the brush into the sharp corner here, okay, then back it out, widen the brush, and then start your stroke.
Okay. Y nos daremos un tiempo para practicar estos trazos. Recuerden, colocan su pincel y lo mueven un poquito hacia la derecha antes de ir hacia abajo. Y cuando estén abajo, lo mueven un poquito hacia la izquierda para definir la esquina.
And for an apostrophe, it's a similar sort of move, but there's twisting of the brush.
Y para un apóstrofe es un movimiento muy parecido, pero tienen que rotar el pincel.
So there's angle at the bottom of the tail.
Y la colita del apóstrofe quedaría inclinada.
And that's just one kind of apostrophe.
Y esa solamente es un tipo de apóstrofes.
John, we have
Yes.
a request. Could you repeat the small stroke, the one for the corner?
Are you talking about this corner? Which corner?
I think it's
Oh,
the
this?
one.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Let me switch to a larger brush.
Hay una solicitud para John si puede hacer o repetir el trazo esquinador.
Okay, I'm going to use a larger brush so it will show on camera.
Y
Better.
voy a usar un pincel más grande para mostrárselos en cámara.
Maybe you can put the cinta, how can I say cinta?
Tape.
This?
Yesterday you put some tape on over the brush to show the rotation.
Yes.
Maybe you can do that again.
Yeah, I think I might even have I do have a large brush with that green on one side, pink on the other.
Nice.
Okay, so I don't want to get this brush dirty, so I'm going to demonstrate how it turns. It goes from, I'll get the brush wet, and that keeps the hairs together. What I'm doing is I'm rotating the brush by pivoting at the top, but sliding it this way at the bottom. So the fin, or the green that you see, goes like this.
Para hacer estas esquinas, voy a rotar el pincel usando como pivote la parte superior del pincel. Fíjense en cómo la aleta verde, el pedacito de cinta, cómo va rotando.
Okay, that's the motion I'm making for the baseline.
Ese es el movimiento que haríamos en la línea base.
So to do it up at the cap height, I don't need very much paint in the brush. And I'm going to fill this area. Okay, this corner and this corner.
Para hacerlo en la altura de mayúsculas, no necesitaría tanta pintura.
So to do that, I load the brush and I palette out most of the paint.
Para hacer este trazo, cargo mi pincel y trato de quitar la mayor cantidad de pintura.
I align the upper corner here, okay? Then I pull the brush horizontally as I twist it and exit that way.
Para hacer la esquina, me coloco en la esquina superior izquierda y con un movimiento horizontal voy rotando el pincel y este sería el movimiento de salida.
To do this at the bottom,
Ahora lo voy a hacer en la parte
mirror
inferior.
image
Es lo mismo, pero reflejado.
again. And you can do it to square the ends of horizontal strokes too. So
Y también pueden hacer este mismo trazo en los horizontales.
So but you do this for large letters. It's not so important to do it for small letters because the reader is normally so far away that corners that aren't quite square won't be seen from that distance.
Generalmente usas este trazo para definir esquinas en letras grandes. En letras pequeñas no es tan necesario porque la distancia de donde serán leídos o donde está el lector serían unas distancias más grandes.
It's difficult to realize and to keep in mind that as you're painting the letters, you are seeing them closer than any person, any reader will ever see them. So you shouldn't be overly critical of your work.
Es difícil de imaginar, de imaginar que cuando tú estás haciendo las letras, tú eres la persona que las estaría viendo lo más cerca. Generalmente la gente los estaría viendo de más lejos. Así de que no se preocupen por sobredetallar su trabajo.
So I see occasionally on Instagram, beginning sign painters, and they try to get every little detail right, and they'll just keep working on a corner until they get it absolutely perfect, like this. You're wasting your time. Nobody is going to see that.
A veces veo principiantes en Instagram perdiendo su tiempo tratando de definir las esquinas. Nadie se va a fijar en eso.
Okay, so when this happens, it's just because the painter is a perfectionist.
Cuando esto sucede es porque el rotulista es muy perfeccionista.
Okay, leave that for type design.
Déjenle eso a los diseñadores tipográficos.
For
have
knockout work like this, it can be very sloppy.
Ese tipo de trabajos puede ser un poquito mal hecho.
John, we have a request for an accent.
Okay, what kind of accent?
Acute.
Acute, yeah.
Okay, so we probably need a vowel, don't we? Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but let's just take the E, for example. And I'm just going to do the top stroke of the capital E.
Vamos a hacer una letra E con acento agudo. Y para ello voy a empezar con el trazo superior.
Okay, so accents can either be attached or detached. The French, for instance, will attach their accent to the top of the character like this.
Los acentos pueden estar pegados o despegados. Por ejemplo, los franceses
For both grave and acute.
tienden a pegar su acento, tanto el grave como el agudo.
But for acute in Spanish, it tends to be detached, separate.
Pero el acento agudo en español es más común encontrarlo separado.
And same for the tilde.
Y es lo mismo con la tilde o virgulilla en español.
Okay. So the circumflex, the caron, the diaresis, also called umlaut, those are not very common in Spanish.
El acento circunflejo o las diéresis no son tan comunes en español.
Right. Now, there are regional preferences for how steep or shallow the grave and acute are. And the preferences have changed over time. So in the 16th, 17th century, the accents were actually steeper than they are today.
Hay muchas preferencias sobre la inclinación de los acentos. Antiguamente, en los siglos XVII o XVIII, los acentos eran muy verticales.
So it's not just a function of time, it's a function also of location. For example, in Poland, the accents are steeper than they are in many other European countries.
Y no solamente es cuestión de tiempo, sino también de región. Por ejemplo, ay, ¿cómo se dice en español? Poland.
Polonia.
En Polonia, los acentos les gusta hacerlos más verticales.
Yeah. So there are some languages that are heavily accented. Hungarian, Turkish, and so forth. English, by comparison, is relatively unaccented.
Y por ejemplo, hay idiomas que tienen muchos acentos diacríticos, como húngaro y el turco. Pero por lo contrario, yo diría que el inglés es prácticamente un idioma sin acentos.
And in Spanish, because the tilde is used in vernacular lettering too, you see different designs, different formations of the tilde. Some have a lot of curvature, like this. Sometimes the tilde will slant, go uphill.
Y como muchas veces la virgulilla se usa en el rótulo vernacular, puede tener diferentes diseños.
And sometimes you see a tilde that's more this shape.
Y también pueden ver una virgulilla que tiene esta forma.
So depending on the alphabet and the letter style, you will the strokes of that style will inform you as to which style of tilde works best.
Dependiendo del estilo del alfabeto, será el estilo de su virgulilla.
All right. Any other questions about accents?
¿Tenemos otra pregunta sobre acentos?
Now, when I have to letter in Spanish and it comes to the question mark, which goes like this, okay, and the question mark, of course, begins upside down at the start of the question, okay? So there again, I just turn the substrate. I never learned how to do an upside down question mark. So don't ask me to letter a question on a truck or a window.
Cuando rotulo en español e intento hacer el signo de pregunta, lo hago de arriba hacia abajo, y si quiero hacer el signo de apertura, solamente volteo el papel. Así es que no me pregunten rotular en español en un muro o en un camión.
I can do an exclamation upside down, but I cannot do the question mark upside down. That's too complicated for me.
Puedo hacer el símbolo de exclamación, tanto el de apertura como el de cierre, pero no el de pregunta.
All right. All right. Would anybody like to show the most recent, some diagonal strokes or some squaring strokes to get feedback?
¿Alguien que quiera mostrar?
I will go.
Okay. Take your turn.
Yeah, I have a little problem with the diagonals. I think maybe these two are close and not quite.
Yes. It helps if you just do a whole row of diagonals leaning left, then leaning right, or vice versa. But you're making progress. I think that the last two or the last three that you did are better than the diagonals at the start.
Okay, and then I think these are working a little better now.
Yes.
But
Indeed.
I'm having trouble here. Just trying.
Yeah. Okay. That takes some practice, and it also takes some development time. If you do the drawing first and work that out, get the shape of the accent you want, then it's easier to fill it in.
Para los
Ok, thank
acentos
you.
te
Ok.
recomiendo que dibujes primero para obtener la forma adecuada.
Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome.
¿Alguien más quiere mostrar?
We have some requests. And
Okay.
one question, what is your brush? What brush are you using today?
It is the MAC Golden Tacklon, 1/4 inch, series 162.
El pincel que estoy usando es de la marca MAC, de la serie Golden Tacklon, de 1/4 de pulgada, y la serie es 162.
Sí.
Okay, and the request is for the question mark again.
Okay. Let's not spend too much time on punctuation. If you need to hear my explanation of why I always do a question mark this way, Hen can explain. I do it in the upright orientation, even if it's at the beginning, if it, por qué, okay? And so you invert this over here, but I don't know how to do this upside down, so I turn my paper upside down.
No me gustaría perder mucho tiempo en símbolos de puntuación. Si tienen alguna duda, mejor pregúntenle a Gen. Y lo que yo hago es hacer el mismo signo de puntuación de cierre, pero solamente volteo el papel y lo hago.
Okay. And if I need an upside down question mark in a place where I cannot turn the substrate, then I make a pattern and I tape it to the window, for example.
Y si tengo que hacer el signo de interrogación de apertura, lo que hago es hacer una plantilla.
Yeah, but I'm by trade, I'm limited to the characters that are most used in the English language, and I haven't spent the time to learn characters that will never be used in normal everyday signage.
Y me he dedicado a perfeccionar las letras que se usan regularmente en inglés. No he perdido tiempo aprendiendo letras que no son muy usadas.
Right. So going back to our diagonals,
We
in the-
have a person who wants feedback.
okay, let's have a look.
Okay.
Okay. Well, everything looks pretty well spaced. However, I think your diagonals need more practice, and they got too long. You notice how your gauge has 6 squares instead of 5. Okay, and that changes the scale. Maybe Hen can explain why you want 5 squares instead of 6, and how the 5 squares determine the length of the stroke. That's what got missed. You're not confining your strokes to 5 stem widths high.
Tus trazos están muy bien espaciados, pero veo que tus diagonales están muy grandes y tú estás haciendo tus trazos con una escala de 6 cuadritos o de 6 anchos de pincel. Tiene que ser de 5 para que tus trazos sean más anchos y más cortitos.
Thank you. I totally missed that I was using 6 instead of 5.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
then
sorry.
now you understand that when you change the number of squares there, your letters will become either lighter in your case or darker with fewer squares.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Se me olvidó hacer una escala de 5 cuadritos en vez de 6. Gracias, Carla.
Okay.
Yo quisiera mostrar también
Jordan, adelante.
en cámara.
Okay. Oh yeah, that started out very well. You've tried the letter A, and we'll be getting to the letter A very shortly. So you're ahead of the game.
Muy bien. Tú ya todo va yendo muy bien y parece que ya te adelantaste con la letra A, que es lo que vamos a hacer a continuación.
Okay. Gracias.
You're welcome. So back to the subject of diagonal strokes. We don't have the ability to just learn one angle of inclination. We have to be able to vary the amount of slant depending on the letter. Now, with that much slant, you can only assume that this is going to become an X, right? It's too shallow for the letter A. So for the letter X, you determine how you want the cross stroke to go. Something like this. And let me see if I can squeeze in here and do the second stroke without my head blocking your view.
Para los trazos diagonales es muy importante aprender a hacer diferentes inclinaciones. En este caso, haciendo este primer trazo inclinado, lo único que podemos asumir que es que va a ser una X, porque el ángulo es muy plano para hacer una A.
Okay, and that's good enough, for the X. Again, this stroke here wants to be just a little bit heavier than the first stroke for optical compensation.
Y esto está bien. Y hay que tener en cuenta que el segundo trazo es un poquito más grueso que el primero, solamente como un ajuste óptico que deben de tomar en cuenta.
Now, if we make a diagonal stroke with less tilt, with less slant, for instance, like this, I'll let you decide what letter this will become.
Y si hacemos un trazo diagonal menos inclinado, díganme qué letra podría ser si tenemos esa inclinación.
Would it make a better W or a V?
V is the answer in the chat.
Correct.
Están en lo correcto.
And then we use the squaring stroke at the bottom.
Y usamos el trazo esquinador en la parte inferior.
So you understand the importance of these 4 strokes: vertical, horizontal, diagonal.
Y quiero que entiendan la importancia de esos 4 trazos: vertical, horizontal y los 2 diagonales.
And you can see diagonal strokes are used for the A, the K, the M and N, okay, the R. And then all of these characters have a diagonal stroke, V through Z.
Y como pueden ver, en las diagonales las van a encontrar en la letra A, en la letra K, en la letra M, N, R, B, W, X, Y y Z.
Diagonal strokes tend to be a problem area for beginners because everywhere two diagonal strokes meet, the stroke needs to be thinner at that junction, just a little bit thinner. And that's hard to master if you're just learning brush control.
Para principiantes las diagonales son un poco más complicadas porque cuando tu trazo se une al otro trazo, tenemos que hacerlas un poco más delgadas y esto es difícil de dominar al principio.
Okay. And as I mentioned yesterday, the interior strokes, the diagonals, tend to be a little bit thinner for the M and the W.
En este estilo, las diagonales interiores en la M y W tienden a ser más delgados.
Okay, so I won't trouble you with the W, but in English, we do use a lot of W's, and beginners often make the mistake of creating the point way down low, but it should reach the capital line.
No voy a profundizar en la W, pero en inglés, como es una letra que se usa mucho, los principiantes tienden a hacer el vértice del medio un poco abajo y este vértice debe de tocar la altura de mayúsculas.
And similarly, the midpoint of the M goes all the way to the baseline.
Y del mismo modo, el vértice de la M debe de tocar la línea base.
Okay. But the M and the W are problems for beginners because beginners often don't look at the model. They try to think of how they learn to form an M when they were in elementary school.
Y el problema con los principiantes es que cuando hacen la letra M y W es que no revisan el modelo. Simplemente tratan de hacer la letra M y W como lo aprendieron a hacer en la primaria.
So I'll point out here that the A is not just one stem width at the apex. It's about 1 3/4. Can you see the distance from here to here is much wider than one stick width?
Y me gustaría mostrarles que el vértice en la letra A es más ancho que un palito, que nuestra plantilla del palito de madera. O sea, es casi 1 más 3/4 del ancho de nuestro pincel.
And the reason for making the top of the A broad is to enlarge the upper counter.
Y el motivo de tener el vértice así de ancho es para tener una contraforma más amplia en la letra A.
It's not necessary to broaden the bottom of the V for the simple reason that the V has no crossbar.
Y esto no es necesario hacerlo en la letra V porque no tiene una barra transversal.
Right. Another thing about diagonals is that the bottom of the N here is one stick width and the top is a little bit wider than one stick width.
Pero en el caso de la N, el vértice inferior es casi un ancho del pincel, pero el vértice de la parte superior es un poquito más grande que un ancho de pincel.
And here's a little toy I made for myself.
Y aquí es un pequeño juguetito que me hice para mí mismo.
So this N has a nice shape. The top is a little bit broader than one stem width, and the bottom point is one stem width. So 1, and then the diagonal is 2.
Y aquí pueden ver cómo los vértices varían en anchura. El vértice inferior es un ancho del pincel o un ancho del trazo vertical, y en el caso del vértice superior es un poco más ancho que el trazo vertical. Y el diagonal son dos trazos o dos anchuras del trazo.
Okay, so I have seen videos where lettering workshops are taught with this as the shape of the N, and that is wrong.
He visto algunos videos de algunos estudios de rótulo donde hacen este tipo de N con dos vértices anchos y eso está mal.
You see the bottom here is 2 stick widths wide, and it's even more at the top. And the trouble with making an N like this is that the counterforms, the white triangles, are the wrong shape.
Y el problema de hacerlo así de ancho es que las contraformas tienen una forma incorrecta.
So I can also show some other ridiculous shapes.
Y les puedo mostrar también otras formas ridículas.
My friend Ed Bengat liked that shape. We never agreed.
Mi amigo Benguet le gustaban estas formas. Nosotros nunca nos pusimos de acuerdo.
But this was popular in the 19th and early 20th century.
Y esto se volvió muy popular a principios del siglo XIX.
Yeah. And to make an upside down N looks like this.
Y una letra N volteada de cabeza se vería algo así.
Okay, you can see the difference between that one, and then you move the diagonal over, and now it looks correct.
Y pueden mover un poquito la diagonal y pueden ver ahora cómo se ve correcta.
All right. So I use this a little toy, just cut paper, to demonstrate the correct and incorrect formations of a simple letter, 2 verticals, 1 diagonal, and it's the position of the diagonal that tends to be the problem for beginners.
Y con esta técnica ustedes pueden previsualizar la manera correcta de hacer la N, dos trazos verticales, una diagonal, y también pueden ver cómo no hacerlas.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
People is so happy with your little toy. You should patent
Okay.
it.
By the way, I don't hold a patent on this. Anyone is free to copy this idea.
Esta idea no tiene patente, entonces la pueden copiar para sus clases. We have many teachers here and on YouTube and in the call.
Well, good. Hello to you all. Welcome. Are there any other questions that you want me to cover before I get into the details of construction here?
Maybe we can take a break before going to
Okay.
full alphabet mode.
Okay.
What do you think?
Sounds like a good idea to me. I'll get another cup of tea.
Muy bien, vamos a tomar un pequeño break de 10 minutos. Nos vemos en 10. Descansen, vayan a relajarse un poco porque va a empezar lo bueno.
Okay. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
We are back. Estamos de vuelta.
Hello again.
Hello, John. Okay, I think we are ready.
Okay. Ring the bell, blow the whistle. All right, welcome back, folks.
Bienvenidos de vuelta.
So here's an alphabet that was included on the PDF that was distributed, and I apologize to those who are just live streaming on YouTube because you didn't receive one of these. But if you join the sign painting support group on Facebook, you will have access to this document. It's up to you whether you want to join. I give these out for free to my students, Cooper Union, TypeCon, various places. But this is a standard block letter which has a cap height of 5 stem widths. So that's what we're going to focus on.
Este es el alfabeto de letra de bloque. Este lo van a poder encontrar en sus PDFs. Y los que están en YouTube lo podrán encontrar en el grupo de Sign Support Group o también en el grupo de apoyo a la rotulación a pincel en Facebook. Yo le entrego estos modelos generalmente a mis estudiantes en Cooper Union y en TypeCon.
And we should probably make this available through the Grupo too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a combination of verticals, diagonals, and horizontals. And I want to talk about the curved strokes, the round strokes now.
Aquí tenemos una combinación de verticales, horizontales y diagonales, pero ahora quiero enfocarme en los trazos curvos.
And we're going to start with the 5th and the 6th categories, being the 2 halves of the O.
Y vamos a comenzar con las categorías quinta y sexta, que serían los trazos izquierdo y derecho de la letra O.
So the first curved stroke is on the left and it goes this way. The second stroke is on the right and it goes this way.
El primer trazo va a la izquierda y va de arriba hacia abajo, y el segundo trazo es a la derecha y va de arriba hacia abajo.
The stroke on the left can be used for the C, the G, the Q, and the 0.
El primer trazo, el de la izquierda, se puede usar también en la letra C, en la Q y en el 0.
The stroke on the right can be used for the D and the Q.
Y el trazo de la derecha puede ser usado en la letra D y en la Q.
So these would be the 5th and 6th of 12 foundation strokes for this alphabet.
Este sería el quinto y sexto trazos básicos de 12 que tiene este alfabeto.
So as I mentioned yesterday, paying attention to the shape of the counter of the O is critical.
Y como les decía ayer, poner atención a la letra de la contraforma o del espacio interior de la letra es crítico.
The bowl, which is this wide part of the curve, is just a little bit wider than a stem width.
El trazo curvo es ligeramente más grueso que un ancho de pincel.
And you'll notice on your handout that the O, the top overshoots the cap line and the bottom overshoots the baseline. There's some overlap, and that is called overshoot.
Y pueden, si se fijan bien, pueden ver que los trazos curvos en la parte superior e inferior sobresalen un poco de la línea de mayúsculas y de la línea base. A eso le vamos a llamar rebase.
And this is for optical compensation to make these round letters look as tall as the H.
Y este es un ajuste óptico que se realiza para que la letra se vea del mismo tamaño que los trazos rectos.
So if you examine your handout, you'll see that there is overshoot on the C, but not the D.
Si analizan su PDF, pueden ver que hay un rebase en la letra C, pero este no existe en la letra D.
And the overshoot is also common to the G, the S, the Q.
Y el rebase también es común en letras como la G, la S y la Q.
And then at the bottom and bottom only of J and U.
Y solamente en la parte inferior de la J y la U.
Okay. Same carries over to the figures.
Y lo mismo pasa con los números.
So if we want the O to have the right shape, we have to determine where the top and bottom of the counter are. So given the fact that there is overshoot here and here, we just place the stick there and we have an indication. We can make a dot there to give ourselves a guide for how tall the counter is.
Y para determinar la forma correcta de nuestra letra O, podemos empezar por colocar nuestro palito de madera o nuestra guía directamente donde consideramos que estará el rebase y de ahí colocamos un puntito que nos determinará la altura o el tamaño de nuestra contraforma.
So this is not a geometrical ellipse, but you'll see that it's very close in shape to the geometric ellipse on this this drafting template. It's very, very, very close in shape.
Y aunque la contraforma no es geométrica, es muy cercana a una elipse de nuestras plantillas.
So when I'm making templates for letters, I draw the counter shape first.
Y cuando hago plantillas de letras, lo primero que hago es la contraforma.
And here's an example of a template that I made for a layout for a card, price card this size.
Y este es un ejemplo de una plantilla que hice.
You see, I can draw through these holes to get different figures, and the result is something like this.
Y a partir de aquí puedo calcar, puedo hacer diferentes números.
You see how that works. I
¿Ven
have
cómo funciona?
the triangle here is in red, okay, and everything else on the card was done with a brush and just a few pencil lines to give myself guides for overshoot and spacing.
Y esta plantilla me ayuda mucho para el espaciado y para los rebases.
And you'll see there's no overshoot on the flag of the 5.
Y pueden ver que no hay rebase en la barra superior del 5.
And I cut the holes out of this card with a stencil knife, an X-Acto.
Y corté esta plantilla con un exacto.
So when you make yourself some cardboard templates, then the layout goes much faster.
Y cuando hacen sus propias plantillas, la composición la pueden hacer un poco más rápida.
So because we're going to do the O next, the 2 halves of the O, there are some things that you should notice about the construction. And that is that the overlap, the place where the 2 strokes overlap at the top here and the bottom, that's about 11 o'clock on the clock face and about 5 o'clock, or 11:30, 5:30. It's not perfectly vertical.
Y algo que debemos de poner atención son a 2 cosas, que son los puntos de solapamiento. Uno es a las 11 y otro es como a las 5, 5:30 aproximadamente, si toman en cuenta que la O fuera la cara de un reloj.
And Hen, can you explain why it's important to have that much overlap? Why you don't want to just abut the strokes?
Y el solapamiento de estos 2 trazos es muy importante para ocultar o para suavizar la unión de los trazos.
It's that you want the smooth transition. It's like a relay on the track. There's a transition zone. One comes in as the other gains speed to take the baton.
Y esta técnica de solapamiento sirve para tener estas uniones de los 2 trazos muy suave y tener una transición gradual entre ambos trazos. Cuando uno se está retirando, el otro toma el liderazgo.
So the left stroke begins past 12 o'clock and ends around 4 o'clock.
Por ejemplo, el primer trazo empezaría casi a las 12 o poquito pasando las 12 y terminaría antes de las 5.
That's right. And the brush is turning counterclockwise for the left side.
Y el pincel está girando en el sentido de las manecillas del reloj.
And then on the right side, the top of the stroke begins around 10 o'clock and it terminates past 6 o'clock.
Y en el trazo derecho, él empezaría antes de las 11 y terminaría pasando las 6.
Okay. Are there any questions about that basic principle?
¿Tienen
Any questions in the chat?
preguntas sobre este concepto? Solapamiento y las manecillas del reloj.
There's a question, not about that, but about the brush. Is it the same brush than the one you use for casual?
It's the same size brush. It will make a stroke the same width. So this is the brush, the MAC brush I was using. This is the Simmons, and they perform almost identically.
La pregunta es sobre qué tipo de pincel está usando ahora. Y es un pincel muy parecido al que se está usando para casual. Sin embargo, es otra marca.
And also the red-handled brush here, and this is a Princeton. But as I said yesterday, even though the ferrules, the metal parts, are identical, the brush hairs are different in length. The MAC is the longest, and the Princeton is the shortest hair, but it's all synthetic hair.
Y aunque la parte del cabo, la parte metálica es la misma, las cerdas del pincel son distintas. El pincel naranja es el MAC, el azul es el Simmons y el rojo era de la marca Prince.
And in Canada, there's a good brand made. It's called Heinz Jordan, and it is a similar golden Taklon, but the ferrule is just a little bit longer.
En Canadá hay un pincel de la marca Jordan donde el cabo es un poquito más largo.
Yeah, this is Heinz Jordan. So I will say that for most of my career, we did not use synthetic brushes because they didn't perform up to a professional standard. But that started to change about 10 or 15 years ago. And now the synthetics are very good.
A lo largo de mi carrera no acostumbrábamos usar pinceles sintéticos porque eran de muy mala calidad, pero eso ha cambiado desde hace unos 10, 15 años. Los pinceles sintéticos ahora se comportan muy bien.
So I had a strong prejudice, a well-founded prejudice against synthetic brushes for a long time because they could not produce good results. But when Ken Barber of House Industries showed me the Simmons brush and asked me to try it when I was visiting there several years ago, I tried it and I loved it.
Por muchos años rechazaba la idea de usar pinceles sintéticos, hasta que un día Ken Barber me pidió que probara el pincel Simmons, y eso me hizo cambiar de idea.
Yeah, so I began teaching with the Simmons, and then as less and less expensive brushes became available, I kept switching to the least expensive brush as long as it performed well.
Y conforme empezaron a salir pinceles sintéticos mejores, me fui cambiando a los que fueran más baratos.
And just a little bit of history, the reason the early synthetic brushes performed poorly was that the hairs were the wrong shape. The hairs didn't taper like a natural hair does.
Y un poquito de historia, la razón de por qué los pinceles sintéticos eran muy malos era porque las cerdas tenían la forma incorrecta. No se hacían angostos en la punta, lo que el pelo natural sí lo hace.
So even though this is a brush that sells for a student price, it performs like a very highly sought after professional tool.
Y aunque este pincel tiene el precio que podría ser accesible para un estudiante, se comporta como un pincel para profesional.
And this brush will make all of the strokes you see on this chart.
Y este pincel hará todos los trazos en este modelo.
Okay, so you don't need to switch to a different brush to do any of these characters.
Y no necesitan de cambiar de pincel para hacer otro tipo de trazos en este modelo.
All right. So let's start doing some practice strokes. First, sketching in the counter of the O and noticing that it's about a stem width and a half wide. And you know how far down from the top it is because you can measure with your brush.
Y vamos a comenzar por hacer los trazos que componen la O, dibujando o trazando primero la contraforma. La contraforma tendría 1,5 anchos de la anchura del pincel. Y pueden colocar su pincel para determinar los trazos superior e inferior.
So you see the counter is nearly 2 widths of the brush in width, but it's only 1 width of the brush from the top of the overshoot and the bottom of the overshoot.
Y pueden ver que la anchura de la contraforma sería casi la anchura de 2 anchos de pincel, y de la parte superior e inferior estaría a 1 ancho de pincel.
So here's what I would like for you to do.
Esto es lo que me gustaría que hicieran.
You determine the overshoot of your O, top and bottom. You come down 1 brush width here and up 1 brush width there. You determine the width of the counter. And then with this point, this point, this point, and this point, you can sketch in the shape of the counter.
Me gustaría que primero marquen el rebase en la parte superior e inferior, y desde ahí calculen el ancho del pincel y hagan también las marcas, y desde ahí marquen la anchura de la contraforma, que sería aproximadamente 2 anchos del pincel. De ahí pueden dibujar la elipse.
Yes. So you have the north, south, west, and east points determined, and then you sketch in the counter shape, which is an ellipse.
Y cuando tengan estos 4 puntos ya pueden dibujar la elipse.
Okay, so I'll do this once again. Here's the overshoot. Here's 1 brush width up. Here's the overshoot, 1 brush width down. How wide do we want to make this? Just a little less than 2 brush widths. So that would be this point here and this point here. So you're connecting the dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. And here's how they connect.
Y va de nuevo. Recuerden trazar primero los rebases en la parte superior e inferior. De ahí calcular el ancho de un pincel, colocar los puntos en norte y sur, y en la parte media calcular menos de 2 anchos de pincel para trazar la parte izquierda, el punto derecho y el punto izquierdo, y desde ahí ya pueden dibujar la elipse que formaría la parte interior.
And so once you have the counter form sketched in, then you have very good guidelines for determining where the stroke goes.
Una vez que tengan la contraforma, les va a servir de una guía muy práctica para saber dónde irá su trazo.
You see? Whereas if I want to do the right side, I know that 1 brush stroke width determines the weight of the bowl, this distance.
Y lo mismo sucedería con el trazo derecho. A través de esta guía podríamos saber exactamente dónde irá el trazo.
Okay, so sketch some counters like this, leaving a little bit of space between the 2 halves of the O.
Y traten de dibujar estas contraformas y practiquen estos trazos y traten de mantenerlos con espacio suficiente entre ellos. Con sana distancia.
I'll just freehand the counters here. And demonstrate with a brush. So your ability to control the brush and to keep the stroke uniform in width determines the outcome of your practice. And here's the left side of the stroke. And I'm only looking at how the brush tracks around the counter. I'm not even looking at any other point the brush.
Tu habilidad de mantener la anchura en este tipo de trazos va a determinar la calidad del mismo.
And similarly, on the other side, I'm paying attention only to this side of the counter.
Y en este
That's
caso,
all I'm looking at. I'm ignoring everything else that's going on outside.
y en este caso solamente voy a poner atención al lado derecho de la elipse. Lo demás lo voy a ignorar.
Because if you don't get the shape of the counter right, then you can't get the shape of the letter right.
Porque si no consiguen la forma de la contraforma bien, no conseguirán la letra de la forma de la letra correctamente.
So now, without any guidelines,
Y ahora lo mismo, pero sin ninguna guía.
and I know from experience, the shape I'm trying to achieve on the inside of the letter.
Por experiencia sé la forma que tengo que conseguir en la contraforma.
So any questions about brush rotation?
¿Alguna pregunta sobre la rotación?
Once again, this is the twisting, the rotating action of the brush, but the handle rests on my middle finger to add stability to that turning.
Y recuerden cuál es la posición de mis dedos referente al mango del pincel para poder rotar. Mi dedo índice y mi dedo pulgar son los que están sosteniendo el pincel y al mismo tiempo ayudándome a rotar.
Okay. Left.
Izquierda.
And this is the hardest part for a right-hander because I'm running out of rotation, and it got a little out of control, but I wanted to just show this is always going to be the most difficult for a right-handed person. So I made this mistake knowing that you're going to be able to relate to this difficulty in about 10 minutes because you'll all have this mistake.
Y para los derechos, las personas que son derechas, este trazo es el más complicado, sobre todo en la parte inferior. Yo cometí este error y lo dejé así para que pudieran ver y se pudieran ser empáticos conmigo cuando ustedes también sufran al hacer este trazo.
Okay, so instead of making this little goof, now I'll try to do it correctly.
Ahora, en vez de equivocarme, voy a tratar de hacerlo correctamente.
Better.
Mucho mejor.
It's better. And if I want to make a Q out of this, I have my choice of what style of tail, as I explained yesterday. But I like a relatively short tail.
Y para este trazo nos puede servir para una Q. Y ahora tengo que decidir qué estilo de Q quiero hacer. Para esta voy a usar una con una colita muy chiquita.
You always find that amateurs and beginners want to show off with a long, very elaborate swash tail. That doesn't really fit the style.
Y es muy recurrente para principiantes que quieren presumir hacer colas muy largas. Eso realmente no encaja con este estilo.
No. Don't try to show off until you have a solid foundation and you can do all of these characters according to the exemplar.
No traten de presumir sin antes dominar el modelo.
Okay. Any other questions from the chat before we practice these two halves of the O?
I have a question just for
Yes.
clarify. In this case, is the brush perpendicular to the paper all the time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
La pregunta es si tiene que conservar el papel perpendicular a lo largo del trazo y la respuesta, John, es que sí.
there is some swiveling like this, but it's not, the brush never becomes shallow. It's a moderate amount of swiveling. Now, the bigger your counter is, the more swiveling will occur.
A pesar de que la posición es perpendicular, va a existir un poco de variación en la inclinación del pincel, pero no mucho. Si la letra fuera más grande, habría más variación.
Okay, and further questions from the chat about the formation of these two sides of the O, the bowls.
I think we don't have questions.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have.
Now, curved strokes are, by their very nature, more difficult to learn than straight strokes because you have so much going on. Brush rotation, okay? You're looking more closely at the counter forms in the curved letters. And when we get to complex characters like the 8 here, okay, that's a very difficult character to master. It takes a tremendous amount of brush control.
Por su propia naturaleza, los trazos curvos son más complicados porque un montón de cosas están sucediendo al mismo tiempo, como desde la rotación del pincel, como el estar cuidando la contraforma, porque este tipo de trazos van muy cercanos a la contraforma. En este caso, si queremos hacer el número 8, que es uno de los más complejos, nos va a tomar un montón, nos va a requerir un montón de control del pincel.
It must be said that this alphabet is the most versatile in the whole sign painting repertoire because it covers the middle ground. It is not exceptionally formal, but it's not as loose and informal as the speed stroke casual style we learned yesterday.
Y cabe señalar que este estilo de bloque, y en particular este modelo, es de los más prácticos para la rotulación. No es tan formal, pero tampoco tan informal como el estilo casual que aprendimos ayer.
Okay. And by adding little spur serifs to this alphabet, these characters, we can make it look somewhat more formal.
Y si agregamos unos remates pequeñitos, de cierta manera lo podríamos hacer más formal.
So you will see the serif version on the second to the last page of that PDF.
Y podrán ver ese estilo en la antepenúltima página de su PDF.
Yeah. So you can easily do more than 50% of your production work with this alphabet alone and variations in width and weight.
Ustedes podrían hacer más de la mitad de su producción en su práctica de rotulación con este mismo modelo, simplemente con algunas variaciones en ancho y peso.
Yeah. A plain block letter like this offends nobody.
Y este tipo de letra de bloque no ofende a nadie.
Okay. If anybody would like to show curve strokes, I'm ready to look.
Y si alguien quiere mostrar sus letras O, es momento de mostrarlas.
Okay.
Okay, we have...
Carla?
Yeah, I was going to send a picture, but I show you here with my laptop.
Okay, let's look.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I can't see that it very well. There, that's a better look. All I want to see are the half strokes and not
okay.
the full O. you're making progress. The last character that you did there on that line, I think that's a lot better than your first.
Yeah.
Me gustaría ver los trazos izquierdo y derecho por separados, aunque veo que estás progresando. Las letras O de la derecha se ven mejores que las del principio.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
¿Quién es el siguiente? Vamos con Moheshiro.
Alejandra estaba antes.
Oh, ok. Ustedes muestren. Es que yo no veo todo.
Listo.
Pero si me ayudan a
¿Lo puedo
Spotlight,
poner
por
aquí?
favor. Es que en el Spotlight no se ve,
Okay,
pero hay que eliminar el otro Spotlight.
¿Cómo?
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Sería
Listo.
este.
Yeah, just keep practicing. There are
Yeah.
some trembles, some shakes in those curves, and that's only a matter. It'll be a matter of time before you become comfortable, and then the strokes will appear much more smooth.
Se ven muy bien. Veo que tienes un poco que tiemblan un poco los trazos, pero eso con la
Sí.
práctica lo irás dominando.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Muy
Now, in this case, I think that your right stroke isn't beginning far enough over here. It should be well over the top. Okay, so look at the place where the stroke begins and it ends. And if you want to draw this O with the overlaps and pencil first, and then just do 1/2 at a time, you will see rapid improvement.
Te aconsejaría que pongas atención al inicio, dónde es el inicio y dónde es el final del trazo. Y a través de ello se verá una gran mejoría.
The thing about getting a round character or curved character to look natural and organic is avoid trying to make it conform to a grid. Now, I know that some so-called lettering instructors say, well, you have to map this out in squares. No, that defeats the purpose. The O is an organic character, not a geometric character.
Sí, algo que debes de considerar es que la O no debe de conformarse a una retícula. Por ahí muchos artistas de lettering tratan de dibujar la retícula para hacer su letra O, pero olvídate de eso, la letra O es orgánica.
The letter must be able to breathe. In other words, think of it as an organism. It isn't based on a grid structure, just the opposite.
Piénsalo como si fuera un ser viviente. No se conforma a una retícula, todo lo contrario. Necesita de respirar. Ok, ¿quién más?
Okay, next. Okay, the strokes are simply too heavy. So to regulate the stroke thickness, you're going to have to use a more delicate touch with the brush. And to help achieve that, try making your paint less dilute. You see how your paint is getting kind of gray and it's losing opacity? That's because you added too much water to the paint. And when there's too much water in the paint, the brush is going to be difficult to control.
Parece que hay mucha agua en tu pintura y eso te va a hacer muy complicado de controlarlos. Tus trazos son muy gruesos.
Yeah. So try that. Keep trying those same strokes, but with your paint thicker and a lighter touch on the brush.
Intenta repetir estos trazos con una pintura un poco más espesa y no ejerciendo tanta presión. ¿Ok?
Yeah.
Gracias,
Too,
Enrique.
too much pressure on the brush, but you won't know what the correct pressure feels like until your paint is absolutely the ideal consistency.
Es difícil de medir la presión. Te recomiendo que no ejerzas tanta, pero eso, para calcular la correcta presión, deberías de tener tu pintura en la consistencia adecuada. Gracias, Enrique. ¿Quién es siguiente?
Gracias.
Sandra, estás en pantalla.
Hello.
Hi.
Hola.
Let me show you. Oh, I think Carol, she. Okay.
Okay. The orientation of the chisel edge is not correct for the left half, but at the start of the right half, it is. The bottom of the left stroke angles upward toward 3 o'clock, but it's incorrect at the bottom of the right strokes. So you have a combination of correct and incorrect beginnings and incorrect and incorrect endings. Now, if you can just take the best of the beginnings and the best of the endings, combine those two, and I think you'll have it.
Tus trazos, tanto izquierdo y derecho, tienen un ángulo correcto y un ángulo incorrecto. Por ejemplo, en el trazo derecho, tu inicio tiene el ángulo correcto, pero el final tiene un ángulo incorrecto. Y en el trazo izquierdo, el ángulo de inicio es incorrecto.
And observe on my diagram here that for the right stroke, this point here, the beginning, and the ending point, they're facing one another. And the same is true on the other side. Those points are coming together like, the jaws of an animal.
Fíjate cómo en mi modelo los ángulos se asemejarían a las quijadas de un animal. Coinciden en los ángulos.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
¿Quién es siguiente? Carol.
Yeah. Okay, those are complete O's. Why don't you try some individual strokes, left half and right half, separate, and a little space between them.
Veo que tienes la letra O completa. Me gustaría que hicieras el trazo izquierdo y derecho por separado. Gracias, Carol. Vamos con Enrique.
Yeah, that's a better view. Okay, I think you're having the same trouble with the start of the brush, but the stroke, but your paint is not the right consistency. It looks a little bit heavy. So try to palette your brush to a chisel edge before you make contact with the paper.
Creo que tiene los mismos problemas con el ángulo de inicio y final, pero también veo que tu tinta no tiene la consistencia adecuada. También debes de poner atención a eso.
Okay, thanks.
Gracias, Enrique. Y vamos con Ana o con Carla.
And just to repeat about this important balance I talked about last night between paint consistency and brush load. Each of those two has to be nearly perfect to get optimal results.
Y recuerden que la consistencia de la pintura debe de estar en el punto correcto para tener buenos trazos. Vamos con Ana.
Thank you, Carla. I only have the right side, but I just want to make sure if it was okay before I go for the left.
Yes, and I'm glad to see that you're drawing. The drawings of the counters look good. Okay, so the next part, an improvement on the second line is evident. You had trouble on the top line, but you see how much smoother and consistent in width your 5 strokes on the second line are.
Me gusta mucho que bocetaste primero las contraformas y se puede ver una gran mejoría en tu segundo renglón. Gracias.
So the pencil sketches are helping you enormously.
El bocetar primero te está ayudando muchísimo. Vamos con Carla.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hola, Carla.
Sorry. Hi.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. The 2 halves, left, right, left, right, left, right. So you're ready to put them together. I think that your O's there on the last 2 O's, the sides are too mechanical looking. They look as though they're vertical. Try for a more organic shape for your counter.
Okay.
Eso era lo que quería ver, los trazos por separados, izquierda y derecha. Sin embargo, siento que tus trazos están muy mecánicos.
It's not this shape.
Okay. Thank you.
Y vamos con Jordan.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. I love that cue. Okay, yeah, great progress. Let's just look at this a little bit longer. The consistency of the strokes is admirable, and you're getting the feel for rotating the brush. I can see that, and the results are proof.
Muy bien, Jordan. Me gusta que se puede ver la rotación del pincel y me agrada mucho tu consistencia.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome. The counter shapes are critical, as you've discovered, because you couldn't achieve good-looking letters like these if the counter shapes were wrong.
Y como tú lo experimentaste, las contraformas son fundamentales para obtener una forma de letra ideal.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Understood. You're welcome. Thank you.
Y vamos con... ¿A quién estamos viendo?
A Laura.
Okay.
Laura
Okay.
García.
All right. Here again, I think that your curves need to be less geometric and not as vertical. So you started out with a shape next to your checkerboard. I think you want to go that direction rather than trying to make the bowls vertical.
Tus trazos están muy verticales, muy rectos. Empezaste muy bien si te fijas en las primeras letras que están enseguida de tu escala, los cuadritos, pero intenta hacer los trazos menos rectos.
You see that the first 2 examples show that you sketched in the counters, but when you stopped using the pencil for your preparatory drawing, then you kind of lost your orientation.
Puedes ver que cuando dibujaste las contraformas estaba mucho mejor y cuando dejaste de dibujar perdiste la redondez de tus letras.
All right, keep going.
Vamos con Miguel.
Con Erika.
Ok, Erika.
Welcome.
Erika, no te veo.
Okay. Okay, you're starting to get the feel for that rotation, and it's well worth the effort to put in the practice so that you actually feel the brush encircling the counter.
Muy bien, se ve que estás sintiendo cómo rotar el pincel. Continúa practicando.
Good.
Vamos con Eduardo.
¿Dónde estás, Eduardo?
¿Ya se ve?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, we're looking at different weights of O there, and to get them more consistent in weight, it means that your brush load and the pressure that you put on the brush as you're rotating it have to be more consistent. So that O that follows the Z or Z, okay, that's one of the heavier ones, but the one right below it is one of the lightest. So it does take practice to get the feel for brush pressure.
Veo que tienes diferentes pesos en tu O. Te recomiendo que pongas atención en la carga y en la presión que ejerces para hacer tus letras.
And if you practice the halves, the left half followed by the right half, the left half followed by the right half, and get the two halves the same weight, then they're going to come together perfectly because each part is the way it should be.
Okay.
Gracias, Eduardo.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Y creo que por último tenemos a Jorge. Voy a compartir su imagen.
Oh yeah. Here again, we're having trouble controlling the brush because the paint is too dilute.
Tienes la pintura muy diluida y quizá eso no te está ayudando a controlar el pincel.
So let's get the paint to be thicker and more opaque, and then that will enable the brush to behave.
Hagamos que la pintura esté un poco más espesa y eso te ayudará a que el pincel se comporte. Muy bien. Gracias.
De nada.
Okay, I think we are on time.
Okay.
We have a petition in YouTube. If you can explain again how I think the starting and ending points to make letter O.
Okay. Let me switch to a larger brush so that it shows up better on screen.
Lo voy a hacer en un papel más grande para que se vea mejor en cámara.
So this time with a 1/2 inch brush, I'm doubling the size of the character. So I'm switching from a 2-inch letter to a 4-inch.
Y ahora lo voy a hacer el doble de grande con un pincel de media pulgada. Por lo que quedarán letras de 4 pulgadas en vez de 2.
So here's the 1/2 inch Simmons brush, and here's how I will make my calculations. I want some overshoot at the top, and then I know that when the brush fans out, the top of the counter will be about here. So going right down below, here's where I want the overshoot at the bottom, and here's the point where the bottom of the counter comes in.
Voy a tomar mi pincel de media pulgada, en este caso el de marca Simmons, y voy a partir desde el rebase para hacer mi marca y un ancho de pincel. A un ancho de pincel voy a hacer la marca donde empezaría la contraforma. Lo mismo en la parte inferior. Trazamos un eje vertical en la parte media y de ahí medimos algo así como 2 anchos de pincel o un poquito menos y de ahí dibujamos la elipse.
Okay, I'm drawing this in dark so that it shows up on screen.
Lo estoy remarcando para que lo puedan ver en la cámara.
So the fact that I've already determined the width of the counter here has it guarantees that the character will not be too narrow or too wide, because I know how wide it's going to be over on this side. I know how wide it's going to be over on this side.
El hecho que dibujé la contraforma anticipadamente nos garantiza que nuestra letra O no estará muy delgada o muy ancha.
You see, there's no way to go wrong after the counterform is done correctly.
Después de hacer la contraforma es muy difícil equivocarse.
So the inside informs the outside.
En este caso, el interior define el exterior.
Okay, and again, you know, forget this nonsense where people say, oh, well, you draw in a grid. No, you don't draw in a grid. That takes the life, all the life out of the O. It turns a living organism into something that looks dead.
Olvídense de usar retículas para hacer la letra O. Eso le quita la vida y los vuelve una letra muerta.
Okay, so now we have the letter sketched. We have to determine the beginning and ending points. Now, remember, I was saying that the overlap comes in these areas, top and bottom, right?
Recuerden que tenemos que hablar también sobre el solapamiento de los trazos, que serían en estos puntos.
So for overlap, we have something that looks like this at the top and something like this at the bottom.
El solapamiento se vería de este modo arriba y abajo.
The axis, the true axis of this counter appears to be vertical, but the construction of the character is not what we see in the axis here. The construction axis is actually slanted.
Aunque podemos ver que el eje de la contraforma o de la letra misma es totalmente vertical, el eje de construcción no lo es inclinado.
Okay. Now I'm going to have to change the position of the substrate, because if I try to paint it here, my head is going to be in the way of the camera. So bear with me. I will.
Voy a cambiar la posición del papel porque si lo dejo aquí, mi cabeza va a tapar la cámara.
And aren't these magnets nice and handy?
¿No les parece que estos imanes son muy prácticos?
Okay, right. This is sheet metal because I use it for making patterns using a tool called an electro pounce. I don't think there's going to be time to demonstrate that, but here I will load the brush. And I can't do both halves of the O without burying the beginning and ending stroke. So I'll do the stroke that's closest to me, and that's the right half. So I get that?
Para esto vamos a cargar el pincel y voy a hacer el trazo más cercano a mí para que lo puedan ver.
Okay, now notice where I'm holding the brush. I want more wrist action here, so I'm not gripping the brush close to the ferrule. Okay, I'm gripping it farther away so that when it gets to the most difficult part, I can move my bridge hand around and still maintain control of the brush. So it's critical to know that the grip on the brush for a letter this big is different than it would be for a small letter.
Como esta letra es más grande, tenemos que agarrar el pincel más arriba para tener más movimiento de muñeca.
Right. And you know what I'm going to do? Just so you can see this this outer part of the letter a little bit clearer. Here's my target area. Here's what I'm trying to achieve through brush pressure and rotation. I want to follow this track. You can see that better now. That's the track I want to follow.
Voy a marcar el trayecto de el que va a seguir mi pincel.
So I'm beginning down here at 10 o'clock. I come across the top with the brush fanned out. I'm rotating at each stage of this. I'm pulling down, and all I'm looking at is the counter form.
Voy a empezar a las 10 en punto y el pincel se va a abrir un poquito mientras estamos rotando, pero lo que debemos de poner mucha atención es en la contraforma.
And that came out real well. Now, the reason it's a little bit ragged here is that the marks from the Sharpie are messing things up, but I can go over this stroke and make it look even better. As long as I don't go outside the lines.
Esto quedó muy bien. Sin embargo, si lo ven un poquito tembloroso en los bordes es por el Sharpie, pero podemos retocarlo.
Okay, so to form the left half, the mate, you might say, I want a stroke that begins over here past 12 o'clock and then comes around like this, goes below the baseline, past 6 o'clock, and ends up around 4:30, 5 o'clock, like this. Now, you don't have to come all the way over the top if you don't want. You can start the stroke back here if you choose. But the bigger you make your transition area here, the smoother the outer curve will be.
Para empezar el trazo izquierdo deben de iniciarlo pasando las 12. Sin embargo, pueden hacer esa área más pequeña, aunque para tener una transición más suave les recomiendo hacer el solapamiento lo más amplio que puedan.
I hope my head isn't in the way.
That's okay.
Perfecto. That came out great.
Esto quedó muy bien.
Okay. So I hope that satisfies the person who asked the question. Does it help you see this better if I use the large brush?
Yes.
Okay.
Espero que le haya respondido a la persona que preguntó sobre la letra O. John, I think we are almost done with this workshop, so I have to thank you. And we are.
Well, thank you very much. Can I just address one more thing? And this is something that I've taught for a long time. I don't think any other teacher does it, but it's the construction of an S.
Of course.
S is the most difficult curved character to master. In fact, it's one of the most difficult of all letters because it has what's called a compound curve. And I'll let you translate that.
Ok. Antes de irnos, les quiero hablar de la letra S, que es una de las letras más complejas porque es una curva compuesta. Me gustaría platicarles sobre la letra S antes de irnos.
So you'll notice on the handout that the transition areas, the stroke overlaps, mirror what's happening in the C, the G, the O. In other words, there's a diagonal axis in this overlap area, and there's a diagonal axis in this overlap area.
Pueden ver cómo los trazos de del arco superior e inferior de la S es algo muy similar a lo que pasó con la letra O en su parte superior e inferior. Tienen un eje en el solapamiento que es diagonal.
So the counters of the S are similar in shape, but different in size. The upper counter is just a little bit smaller than the lower counter.
Las contraformas de la letra S son muy parecidas entre sí, sin embargo, la contraforma inferior es más grande que la contraforma superior.
And it's very important to have a vision, a picture in your mind of the shape of the counter.
Es muy importante de tener la forma de la contraforma presente.
And the way I envision this is I put my two thumbnails together like this, side view, and then I start to separate them, and that space in between is describing the spine of the S.
Para calcular las contraformas uso mis dedos pulgares de este modo y conforme los voy abriendo voy descubriendo la espina de la S.
So imagine my upper thumb being the upper counter and my lower thumb being the lower counter of the S, and it allows me to just use a pencil, draw around my upper thumb like this, take my lower thumb, do the same, and putting those shapes together like this provides a rough guide for an S with organic counters and not mechanical, not geometric.
En este caso uso mis dedos como guía para definir las contraformas de la letra S y de este modo vamos a tener formas no mecánicas. John, sorry, I'm mistaken. We have 1 hour ahead.
Yeah, I thought, I didn't know if you were suggesting we take a break, but should I continue with this and then we can take a little 5-minute break?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so construction of the S goes like a lot of other characters in that you want to establish the width of the character first. So it's common practice in the trade to do the spine as your first stroke.
Al igual que en otras letras, en la letra S lo primero que debemos de determinar es la anchura. Y es una práctica muy común en el oficio de rotular primero la espina de la letra S.
Okay. And for a pleasing shape for your S, it is important to stay away from any sort of grid system.
Y de nuevo, para hacer una letra bien hecha, olvídense de usar retículas.
So here we go. Some overlap. This is the transition part.
Recuerden que el solapamiento es la parte de transición.
You come around the spine, the thickest part.
Gracias.
What happened? Someone exploded.
You notice it did not interrupt my concentration. Okay, so we survived that accident. Again, notice the brush rotation.
Fíjense en la rotación del pincel.
Okay. So the other two parts are done like this.
Y los trazos superiores e inferiores se hacen.
This is known as the overhook. Brush up on end and snap. Notice how clean that finish is? Now I, being a right-hander, I cannot achieve that down here because it's the beginning of the stroke and not the end. Now I can get pretty close to a sharp ending, but not as sharp as I can with a finish. So my trick to do this part of the S is to turn the paper over. This allows me as a right-hander to get a perfect lower terminal.
Esta técnica se llama, para realizar los arcos, tiene
Okay.
un componente que se llama snap, que es como este gesto al final o para definir el final del trazo. Para, como soy derecho, nomás me sale el trazo superior, pero para hacer el trazo inferior, lo que hago es voltear el papel.
Now you see that these two shapes are comparable, but this is a much sharper ending than I could get over here because this is the start of the stroke and this is the end of the stroke.
Y pueden ver cómo donde se usa la técnica del snap está más definida la esquina.
So imagine that I'm doing work which can be inverted, and I'm making the S this way.
Imagínense que estoy haciendo un trabajo donde
I don't even have to finish that stroke. I finish it at the top. Then I turn the paper over.
Imagínense un trabajo donde puedo voltear la superficie. Hago primero la espina, después hago el trazo superior, volteo el papel.
And I get a nicer finish. Now I'm also going to show you that the spine can afford to be thicker because that's where the extra weight always wants to go.
Y de este modo la letra queda más definida. También puedo aprovechar para hacer la espina un poquito más gruesa.
And if you do the S like that, you know, it comes out pretty decent.
Y si usan esa técnica, su letra S quedará muy decente.
Okay, and that was without any drawing. Now, certainly if I drew in the counters first, like this, I would be able to give myself, you know, a fighting chance for a better looking character. But you know, this is just, you know, without any preparatory sketches showing how sharp you can get that and how sharp you can get that.
Y esa letra la hice sin dibujar. Claro que la podría hacer mucho mejor si me doy la oportunidad de dibujar las contraformas primero.
That's right. One more thing, that the position of the spine, the S can take different forms. It can have sometimes a larger upper counter than a smaller counter, and the S in the sign painters thick and thin goes like this.
Hay un estilo de rótulo que se llama ancho y delgado o con contraste y va de este modo.
So then you work off the tip of the brush to do the thin.
Y manipulas el pincel para hacer los delgados.
Right? And you already see the stroke contrast there.
Y desde aquí puedes ver el contraste de los trazos entre el grueso y el delgado.
And presto, you get a
Listo.
pretty good looking letter.
Una letra muy
I mean,
bonita.
this S has some action, you know, it breathes. There's something kind of lifelike and dynamic about it.
Y pueden
And
ver cómo esta letra
it
respira, está viva.
It does not feel stiff and over constructed, like, you know, something like this is boring in comparison.
Y no se siente rígida y aburrida, como por ejemplo esta.
Right? I mean, this S looks like it just got out of jail.
Parece que esta letra acaba de salir de la cárcel.
Been in the system too long.
Estuvo en el sistema por mucho tiempo.
Okay. Well, maybe we should take a a little break here and then go into our, final half hour or so, or hour. How much time do we have left?
Hour.
Hour. Okay. Why don't we avail ourselves of a little time to, reorganize and come back in 10 minutes.
Ok, nos vemos en 10 minutos.
Thank you.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Hola.
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 Are you folks getting tired before I am?
No,
It's a lot of
Okay.
information to
you're
digest.
fine.
It
You're
is.
happy.
It's yeah, I don't like to shortchange students on information. never been told that I didn't put out enough in the way of helpful hints. I was lucky in school, in the course of my career, to have associations with professional letterers who are willing to talk about the conceptual aspects of letter forms. And one of the most influential of my mentors was a book designer, calligrapher, type designer, and illustrator by the name of Warren Chappell. And Warren wrote a book, A Short History of the Printed Word. Robert Bringhurst did a revision of that book. And I was acquainted with that book long before I met Warren, because I had a typography instructor here in Iowa City who was also a letterpress printer, and she was highly educated in the field of not just typography, but printing and printing history. And through associations that she helped me forge here in town, I was able to meet an older fella who knew Warren Chappell. And Warren, at that point in his life, was quite elderly and had a reputation for not accepting youngsters very well. But he liked my attitude and kind of took me under the wing and shared with me a lot of his thoughts about letter forms, and The Living Alphabet is one of his books. So it turns out, I didn't know this about Warren, but he studied with Rudolf Koch in Germany before the war. And Warren learned punch cutting there, which is a very old sculptural technique for carving letters in steel, soft steel, to make punches to form matrices for casting type. And in centuries past, it was a very involved process. And Warren confessed that he had no interest in digital typography whatsoever. In fact, he hated it. Nevertheless, he was always happy to talk to me and share with me these ideas about the characters of the character. What I mean to say is that he had a certain feeling for the shapes of characters that utterly brought them to life. And being around an individual like that was so different from being around any of the old timers in the sign shops where I worked and learned. So there's a lot to know about this subject of lettering, and the brush is just one avenue toward that knowledge.
Can you write down the names
of Warren's books?
The books and the exact name of your teacher or your mentor.
Yeah, Kay Amert was my typography teacher, and she became the world's foremost authority on the types of Simone Nicolin, who was the predecessor of the Garamond style, the golden age of French typography. occurred in the 16th century. And Simon de Colin was a seminal figure in the development of that style. And the Carey collection at Rochester Institute of Technology has a book, The Scythe and the Rabbit by Kay Amert. And that was a book put together by her former boyfriend, Robert Bringhurst. And so Kay Amert, A-M-E-R-T.
And Chapel, what is?
Warren, yeah, W-A-R-R-E-N, Warren Chappell, C-H-A-P-P-E-L-L. Warren Chappell was a book designer for Knopf in New York, and he was also an illustrator. He said he backed out of type design, but his most famous type designs are Lydian, named after his wife Lydia, and Trajanus.
Okay, I think I got it.
Okay, easy to Google.
Yeah.
So Bringhurst's revision, update of A Short History of the Printed Word was a project that he relished undertaking, but Robert never met Warren Chappell. So the information that I was able to provide through my personal association with Warren was very valuable to Robert when he was revising Chappell's book.
Great.
I think Robert Bringhurst is best known for his book, The Elements of Typographic Style, which I believe is in 4th or 5th edition. He keeps making additions and corrections, but it's a must-have book for anybody who wants to make a living in the field of typography. Okay. So returning to the block letter, this can be done in a rather loose fashion, as well as a formal fashion. I have, for example, I have these letters drawn. They're a little bit hard to see, but these letters are formed with the same stroke stem widths as the block letters, but this is like my own casual version of block, and double A, double B, double C. All of these doubles do occur in Romance languages, meaning derived from Latin. And wherever I have a double letter in a sign, I like to make the letters slightly different from one another. So that's why I design doubles, where I don't want the two B's to look identical. And this alphabet is currently in development, but it will be available through the sign painting support group and through some of the classes I teach. And then
regresando al alfabeto de bloque, podemos nosotros trabajarlo de manera formal y manera informal. De la manera informal les puedo mostrar uno de mis modelos que estoy trabajando, donde estoy trabajando con pares, que son pares que suceden en todas las lenguas romances, que se derivan del latín. Y este alfabeto lo tendré disponible pronto en el grupo de Sign Painting Support Group en Facebook.
And these are some alternate characters from the same font, but the font that the font that contains all of these characters was inspired by my own brush lettering for essentially a restricted parking sign with letters the same size. So this is a case where I'm copying my own analog work to make something in the digital realm.
En este caso podemos ver algunos caracteres alternativos que están basados en mi propio trabajo analógico para pasarlos al mundo digital.
So wherever an S is followed by a T or a Y, the belly of the S can be a little bit more pregnant. And that's what I do. I adjust the shape of the S to suit the letter that follows it. And imagine that, you know, in some cases you have the trio STY. So I'm controlling the spaces between characters the way I want the word to the trio to look in a word. So the word frosty would include this trio of characters.
En este caso, cuando la combinación incluye una S y una T, intento que la curva inferior de la S parezca una pancita un poco más embarazada para que se balancee el espacio entre la S y la T.
And you'll notice that the upper left corner of each of these characters has the horizontal stroke projecting to the left of the stem, whereas down here, it's the mid-arm that projects to the left of the stem.
En este caso pueden ver que los trazos de la B, D, E y F, así como la J, la P y la R, se proyectan hacia la izquierda, que es el caso contrario de la E y la F que están a la izquierda. Lo mismo sucede con la H.
So exercises like this amuse me in my old age.
Este tipo de trabajo me impresionaban cuando era joven.
And while I'm at it, I'll talk just a little bit more about block letters and how with the same stem widths, you can create different shaped letters. You notice that this is a thick and thin letter because it has extra. I just used black masking tape, right?
Vamos a hablar un poquito hablaremos más sobre letras de bloque y cómo con la misma anchura de trazo podemos lograr diferentes estilos. Como pueden ver, aquí hay una letra con contraste y solamente estoy usando cinta negra.
So this E has the same proportions we're using, 5 stem widths to the height, but I haven't made any optical adjustments. I've used the same stem width for vertical as horizontals, and you'll notice that it makes the stem look a little too thin when I do that.
En este caso la letra E tiene una proporción de 5 anchuras de pincel de altura, pero no tiene ningún ajuste óptico. Entonces pueden ver que el trazo vertical y los horizontales son del mismo ancho, lo que ocasiona que el efecto sea de que el trazo vertical se vea un poco más delgado en relación a los horizontales.
So we haven't talked about optical compensation for verticals and horizontals, but the verticals want to be just a little bit heavier than the horizontals.
No hemos hablado de ajustes ópticos en los trazos rectos, pero generalmente los trazos verticales tienden a ser un poco más pesados, ligeramente más pesados que los horizontales.
Thank you. And to adjust the position of this mid-arm from mechanical center, where it is now, to optical center, I'd want to raise the mid-arm just a little bit.
Y en el caso de la barra media, para sacarla de la mitad mecánica o la mitad geométrica, vamos a tratar de subirla un poquito.
So 3 adjustments would be needed to make this letter optically pleasing. The first thing I do is add weight to the inside of the stem to make the stem thicker.
Tenemos que hacer 3 cosas para hacer que esta letra E luzca bien. Una de ellas es agregar peso al trazo vertical.
And the 2 other departures from the grid, I would raise the mid arm and shorten it.
Y también subimos un poquito el trazo medio y lo vamos a hacer también más cortito.
Right. And in this example, we have a half a stem width here and a half a stem width here, meaning that the black areas add up to 75%, 3/4 of the letter height, and the other 25% is divided evenly here and here.
En este caso, en la letra más oscura, podemos ver que la contraforma es la mitad del ancho del trazo, lo que si sumamos la anchura de los trazos nos daría un 75% del lado negro y nos daría un 25% en la contraforma, que se dividiría igual en ambos lados de la contraforma.
So this letter is practically as bold as it can be and still read from a distance.
Y esta letra es tan pesada como puede llegar a ser, y sin embargo es legible a largas distancias.
And so the letter height here is 8 increments, 8 squares, meaning this upper arm is 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and then the remaining quarter is 1/8 here and 1/8 here.
Y podemos pensar que la proporción de esta letra serían 8 cuartos de ancho de pincel, teniendo como 1/4 en las contraformas.
So this is the limit. Don't make your the sum of your upper counter and lower counter any less than 25% of the cap height.
Y en este caso no les recomiendo que hagan la contraforma 25% menos que la altura de mayúsculas.
Thank you. Easy to understand when it's explained correctly.
Que es fácil de entender cuando se explica fácilmente.
All right. So just to finish up our discussion of these block letters, my handouts are meant to cover a range of sizes, and this is the 2-inch size to be made with this size brush, but you can print out a larger version, double the size, triple the size, and every time you do, either double or triple the size of your brush. So this is 1/4. If I wanted a 6-inch letter, then I'd go to a 3/4 inch brush.
En este caso, vamos a seguir hablando sobre la letra de bloque. Y siguiendo el modelo está diseñado para que se pueda escalar fácilmente. En este caso, el modelo está enfocado a un pincel de 1/4 de pulgada. Si crece en el modelo el doble, también el pincel tiene que crecer el doble de anchura.
Right. So here's 6 inches, my thumb, and the brush fans out just slightly wider than the ruler, but this is the brush I would use for a 6-inch letter. It's a 3/4 inch brush. So you see it fans out just a little bit wider than the ruler, but it comes down 6 inches, perfect.
Para este caso, para una letra de una altura de 6 pulgadas, les recomendaría usar un pincel de 3/4 de pulgada.
And then for the cross strokes, like this.
Y asimismo podríamos hacer los trazos horizontales.
So the arithmetic is very easy if you understand the relationship between stroke width of the brush and cap height.
Estos cálculos aritméticos se pueden hacer muy fácilmente considerando la relación que hay entre el ancho del pincel y la altura de mayúsculas.
So every time you choose a certain style of letter, you should make all of the letters in the word the same stroke width.
Cuando elijan algún estilo, deben de asegurarse que todas las letras en una palabra correspondan al mismo ancho del pincel.
Right. It doesn't look professional to mix up the proportions or the stroke weights.
No se ve profesional que mezclen las proporciones o la anchura de los trazos.
Now, I use this. This is a photocopy from a sign book by an author, the late Ralph Gregory, and he couldn't draw very well. Look how wide his M is compared to the O, and the thin parts of the M, the N, those are thinner than some of his cross strokes. It's certainly thinner than what you see there. His S doesn't have a good shape, but it breaks my heart to see that these examples, so poorly designed, are nevertheless being copied by people who buy that book and they think that this is correct. The U is way too condensed for the width of the O.
Esta hoja la saqué de un manual de rótulo y pueden ver las inconsistencias y la deficiencia en el dibujo. Y me rompe el corazón que esto se esté copiando como una referencia para aprender a hacer letras. Pueden ver cómo hay letras muy anchas como la O y la M y letras muy condensadas como la U y la H. También pueden notar que los anchos y el peso de las letras no es consistente.
So just because it was printed in a book doesn't mean it's a good model.
No porque esté impreso en un libro significa que es un buen modelo a seguir.
Yeah. That lets me off the hook. I haven't written a book.
You have to write a book. Eso me deja fuera de la jugada porque yo no he escrito ningún libro.
Okay. Any questions about the construction of the figures here before we move on?
We don't have with the figures, but we have a question of how is the joining between the curve of the J and the straight stroke, and similar with the U.
Yeah. Typically in the sign trade, there's a bit of a corner right there and on the U as well, and that's permissible. It's also the case that the top diagonal of the K is not exactly horizontal, and how these things got into the sign painting vernacular is simply a matter of expediency. In other words, it was faster to do it this way.
Muchas veces en el oficio tradicional, las uniones entre la curva y la recta generaban una pequeña esquina, así como en la diagonal de la K, la parte superior no era totalmente horizontal. Y eso es porque se consideraba mucho la rapidez al trabajar las letras.
And you'll notice that the sign painter's G has a bar that goes projects to the left and to the right, not just to the left.
Y pueden ver que una G de la rotulación tradicional se proyecta tanto a la izquierda como a la derecha, no solamente a la izquierda, que sería más tipográfica.
So there are different conventions, customs in American sign writing versus British and Australian.
Y hay diferentes modelos de acuerdo a la región. Por ejemplo, en Australia y en el Reino Unido Hay diferentes maneras de hacer la letra G.
So even though there are many A's in the Dutch language, the double A, for example, you don't see this style of A very much in Dutch.
Por ejemplo, en Holanda no es muy común ver una A que tenga un vértice ancho, a pesar de que tienen muchas palabras con doble A.
This is much more common in the New World than it is in the Old World.
Y este tipo de A es más común en América, en el Nuevo Mundo.
And there are a few other little features to point out. The angle here at the joins of the Z, that it's not quite vertical. Same here, not quite vertical. Same here, same here.
Y algo que tenemos que notar es en los vértices de la Z, el 2, el 4, el 5 y el 7, que no es totalmente vertical, tiene un ángulo agudo.
So all of these details were passed down to me by brush lettering people who were taught to do this. And even though I came to the trade in the late 60s and 70s, these little details were still being practiced by the older gentlemen.
Estos tips me los pasaron mis contemporáneos del rótulo cuando yo empezaba, y todavía en los 60s y los 70s esta práctica de cortar los vértices era una práctica que ya se venía usando desde antes.
Yeah. So the reason I learned so much about the history of these letters is that the most influential teachers in my lifetime have been men of my grandfather's generation, not my father's generation, my grandfather's generation.
La razón por la que sé de historia, sé mucho de historia sobre este tipo de letras es porque recibí instrucción de la generación de mi abuelo, no de mi padre, sino de mi abuelo.
So yeah, just, growing up in the Pacific Northwest, as I said yesterday, and just being in the right place at the right time, it's pure dumb luck. I didn't necessarily seek lettering as a career. I was just in an environment which was very rich in lettering.
Fui muy afortunado de crecer en el Pacífico Noroeste.
Yeah, a lot going on when I was a kid. You couldn't get away from the good stuff.
No podías evadir las cosas buenas.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions from the chat or any comments from the TAs? Did I skip over subjects?
There's a request. A word with the letter ñ and with tilde.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a request for making a word with the letter.
Jalapeno.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be.
Okay. I'll use an italic style. How about that? Italic capitals.
Hay una pregunta o una petición si puede hacer una letra una palabra que contenga la letra ñ. We have also a question from YouTube that there is a reason that the apexes in these letters like C, 4, 7, 5, there is a reason that they are in that way, or why they are not sharp and triangular.
Okay. Let's take the 4, for example. The reason that the top is slightly slanted, the 1, is that the question?
I think in the other corner, the one in the diagonal and the horizontal. Yeah.
Okay, and why is it slightly slanted?
Yeah, and why is not or
Not
triangular
vertical?
or vertical?
Yeah, the vertical orientation is a more typographic feature, and this was found to be preferable for brush construction, and that I think still holds true. It's easier for me if I connect these two corners with an angled line. So I think just ease of execution is the answer to that question.
Que las esquinas en ángulos rectos son más tipográficas y las esquinas con este ángulo son mejores para la rotulación a pincel.
Okay, so by request, I'll work off the tip of the brush, and I'm going to make a letter less than 2-inch, and just so you can see where I'm going.
Voy a trazar una letra un poco más pequeña de 2 pulgadas para que puedan ver qué voy a hacer. Lo pienso hacerlo solamente con la punta del pincel.
So I have to revive this brush. It got a little bit stiff.
Tengo que revivir este pincel, está un poco tieso.
So I'm just going to write this word as I would say on a paper sign for the window of a grocery store.
Voy a imaginar que voy a hacer este letrero para la ventana de una tiendita. So we have a question from YouTube. What is the reason that I can get my brush flat? It is developing like a bubble inside the bristles.
Probably paint consistency is wrong. I would guess if the paint has too much water in it, that's going to happen.
La pregunta es de por qué mi pincel no queda plano. Digamos que se le está haciendo una burbuja de aire en el centro. Y la respuesta de John fue que posiblemente tu pintura esté muy líquida. Y from Colombia, they have a request to, even though it's not common in Spanish, they want to see how to make an ampersand.
Okay, I'll put that right at the end. Keep in mind that the italic ampersand does not match the Roman or upright ampersand.
Muy bien, eso lo haré al final. Solo tengan en cuenta que el ampersand itálico no es lo mismo, no es igual que el ampersand romano.
So here's how I would do the italic ampersand. There. Now the Roman ampersand takes a different form, and well, it's on your sheet, so it basically goes like this.
El anterior fue el ampersand itálico, y para el ampersand romano, que pueden ver en su PDF, va de este modo. We have a question in YouTube. Is there a book or document with information about this sketching technique with a few strokes before painting them?
Yes, it's called a scratch layout, and yeah, it's a form of notation. By which I mean you don't need all of the outlines of the characters to get the information down. Let me just do hamburger fonts in a scratch layout, or as much of that word as will fit here. So here's how we quickly sketch out, and I'll condense these letters just so you get the idea. But sometimes I don't even sketch the arms of the E. I just put a little dot at the end point.
Esta técnica se llama borrador. Lo podemos llamar borrador o bocetaje. Y es una manera muy rápida de previsualizar la composición. Muchas veces ni siquiera hago todos los trazos, por ejemplo, en la E.
So this this brush needs a little bit of trimming, I've discovered. But working off the tip rapidly.
Vamos a hacerla directamente con la punta para hacerlo rápida. Aunque este pincel necesita un poquito de... Necesito cortar un poquito las cerdas del pincel. Si tienen una pregunta, por favor pónganla en el chat o pueden brincar aquí a la pantalla y decirla con toda confianza. Estamos en los últimos 5 minutos.
So I'm getting off the layout a little bit, but I'm not too worried.
Me estoy saliendo un poquito del boceto, pero no importa tanto. En algunos talleres de rótulo en México, a esta técnica le dicen indicar. Indicar las letras o indicar la composición. Y generalmente se usa de la mano con una técnica de trazo único, como pueden ver.
And so on. So the M's a little out of whack. Otherwise, you know, that would pass inspection for quick work.
We have two more, one request, one question.
Okay.
That if you can show us that how casual and block letters can interact or to be together. You mentioned
Yeah.
yesterday that they are like good fit.
Indeed. Okay, I'd be happy to.
And there is a question that you can answer while painting. In Mexico, one of the best known sources is the Speedball book for learning lettering. What do you think about them?
Well, I haven't seen the books, so I can't make an informed comment.
Una de las peticiones es si nos puede mostrar un ejemplo donde conviva la letra casual y la de bloque. Y la otra fue una pregunta de qué opina de los libros de Speedball que son muy comunes en México. La respuesta fue de que no los ha visto.
So here's a common template for a letter, and this is not a sign painter's letter. This is a typographic letter. Can you name the typeface?
Este es un template de una letra tipográfica, no de una letra para rotulistas. ¿Me pueden decir qué tipografía es?
Helvética, ¿no?
Sí. Okay, so how do we change this to make it look like a sign painter did it?
¿Cómo podríamos cambiar esta letra a que tenga una apariencia más de rotulista o que fue hecha por un rotulista?
Do it that way.
Así.
And has a different finish. Let's see, I need more water in my paint, but I'm going to continue, press ahead. You get the idea. And we eliminate the beard down here.
Con estos trazos ustedes se pueden dar una idea de cómo transformar una letra tipográfica a una letra de rotulista. Una de las cosas que le vamos a quitar es el espolón en la parte inferior de la letra G.
And that humanizes the character.
Y esto humaniza la letra.
Okay, so the changes occurred here, here, and here.
Los cambios los pueden ver en el arco superior, en la barra de la G y en el espolón.
So back to the question. Let's say we have this area.
Volviendo a la petición, imagínense que tienen esta superficie.
To use both casual and block.
Para usar letras del estilo casual y de bloque.
Okay, now what do I do when I run out of room for the K? Don't worry. We slide these characters closer together like this. And then if we need extra room, we just lengthen the panel.
¿Qué pasa si no nos alcanza las letras cuando estamos indicando o bocetando? No hay problema, solamente ajustamos la anchura de nuevo. Y si necesitamos más superficie, solamente le agregamos un poquito.
This brush might be a little too big for the word block, but I'm going to give it a try.
A lo mejor este pincel va a estar muy ancho para la palabra block, pero Lo voy a intentar. That's good enough.
Working off the tip of the brush.
Lo estoy rotulando solamente con la punta del pincel. Esto quiere decir que casi no está aplicando a presión.
Sorry about my head being there.
Discúlpenme que mi cabeza esté tapando.
Some people is asking for advice on cleaning the brushes, both in water-based and oil-based paints.
Different procedures. Water-based, as I explained yesterday, just keep rinsing in a cup and then stroke the brush on a bar of soap until all of the pigment comes out of the brush.
La pregunta es si algunos consejos para limpiar pinceles que se usaron con pintura a base de agua y base de aceite. Comenta que ayer explicó la técnica de agua. Lo pueden revisar en nuestra grabación del día de ayer. Para contestar la pregunta sobre base de aceite, lo podemos contestar después en el grupo de apoyo a la rotulación a pincel en Facebook.
Okay, this came out real well. I'm not going to have to lengthen the panel. But that is an option. You do the panel, the shape of the bounding box, you do that last, not first.
Esto quedó muy bien, no hubo necesidad de ampliar
my
el panel.
head.
Recuerden que la definición del panel tiene que ser al final, no al principio. Por si se equivocan, tengan oportunidad de corregir.
This will help move the substrate, John.
Also, I think there is the last petition that we're gonna take is if you can make the number 8 in block.
That's always a challenge, but I'm up for it. Okay, here's casual off the tip.
Hacer el número 8 siempre es un reto. Ahora voy a hacer la letra casual solamente utilizando la punta del pincel.
This is not the speed stroke casual. It's something still informal though.
Este no es el estilo rápido de casual, pero de todas maneras es informal. Needs more water.
I guess that does it. You can, if you have space to fill, sometimes you just, put a little bit of a shadow underneath
Oh.
like that. Don't make a big production of it though.
Y si les queda espacio pueden agregarle alguna sombrita.
Okay,
No necesita
so
mucha
don't
producción.
have room to do an 8 on this sheet. I'll grab another. Well, we got this should be big enough. So what's style of 8? The block?
Block.
Okay, this is approximately the relationship of upper and lower counter. So we know that this is going to be the stem width, right? Stem width. So this turns out to be the height of the letter here, the depth of the letter here. Okay, now with the wide brush, move this over just a little bit.
Ahora con el pincel más ancho.
First stroke on the left will be this one.
Este sería el primer
Second
trazo.
second stroke on the right will be this one.
Yes.
And then I will repeat below.
Y ese sería el segundo trazo a la derecha. Y lo mismo, el mismo orden sería en la parte inferior.
Get some more water in the paint. Be right back.
Necesito un poquito más de agua.
Okay, going over that again for a little bit more stroke width.
Voy a repasar el trazo para darle un poquito más de peso.
Okay. A very thirsty brush.
Un pincel muy sediento.
Paper is just a little bit too thin to take this much paint, so I would never use this kind of paper for water soluble paint for banners. But you can, before the paper actually buckles, you can see my brush strokes.
Este papel está muy delgadito. No utilizaría este papel para hacer letreros. Pero al menos pueden ver los trazos antes de que se arrugue el pincel.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you. It didn't come out too bad. The relationship of the upper counter to the lower counter should never be underestimated. If one is off, it's going to make them both look bad.
No debes de perder en cuenta. No debes de.
Okay, I would say the upper counter should be a little bit lower. You see, this got kind of thick in here, but I could make the character bolder to forgive this little sin here.
No debes de subestimar la relación entre las contraformas superior e inferior, aunque creo que la parte de en medio me quedó muy gruesa. Voy a perdonarme ese pecado.
Yeah. So you look at it upside down, it still looks okay. It reads as an 8.
Y aunque lo voltees de cabeza, está bien. Todavía se lee como un 8. John, thank you. very much. I think with this, we are finishing this workshop. Fantastic
Oh, yes.
workshop.
But thank you very much for organizing this, Hein. And the fact that there were more than 200 people on the wait list indicates the level of interest, and I'm very encouraged by it.
That's right. There's a lot of interest in the community, and you will see the improvement next time you are with us.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Can you come to the camera? ¿Se pueden venir todos a su cámara para tomar la tradicional foto final? Les agradezco mucho que estuvieran aquí acompañándonos, a quienes lo hicieron desde YouTube, Facebook y claro, aquí desde Zoom. La verdad, este es un gran esfuerzo. Agradezco también a todo el equipo.
You're welcome.
A Tamara, a Erika, a Miguel, a Eduardo.
Thank you for the help, you TAs.
Adriana, que no está, no la veo por ahí. Muchas gracias también. Y ahí va la foto. 1, 2, 3.
Bingo.
Ahí va otra, nada más por si acaso. 1, 2, 3. Ok, nos vamos a despedir de la gente que nos está viendo desde YouTube y Facebook, y vamos a despedirnos más íntimamente aquí en Zoom.
Gracias, señora Ramírez. So you have pictures